Well, health officials have confirmed a 6th case of measles in Toronto. They say the latest case involves an adult who is over the age of 40. Earlier this week, 2 children and 3 adults were diagnosed with measles, and there's no clear link between these individuals. They're all from separate families. Officials are urging people to make sure their vaccination records are up to date. Well, we've been asking you to write in your questions about the measles virus, and for more about what you need to know to protect yourself and your family, we're joined now by emergency room physician Dr. Belchetz. Thank you very much for being here, doctor. First off, I just want to ask you, we just saw that there's a new case in Toronto, so 6 in Toronto, 7 cases in Ontario. How worrisome is that for you?
Well, I think what's very worrisome about what we're seeing is what you already spoke about, is the fact that these cases are not connected. They don't seem to have gotten the illness from each other. And whenever we see a pattern of illness like this, what we're worried about is that suggests that measles is actually out there in the community, that this is not an isolated outbreak. And the fact that vaccination rates have been dropping out in the community. The latest numbers that I've heard are around 88%, and this particular virus requires about 95% immunization for us all to be protected. When we start hearing about it potentially floating out in the community, it makes us all scared that this could be the beginning of a larger outbreak.
Well, people are certainly scared. So let's get to our questions that were sent in. Our first one comes from Miriam Tawadros. She's in Toronto. She's an expectant mom who's due in any day now, I guess, and she's scared of what this means for her newborn. She writes, with an outbreak in the city, what are the precautionary measures new parents should take to protect their newborn? Are we to avoid public spaces? We all know how dangerous measles can be for infants. How do we protect them during this outbreak?
Well, I think that's a great question, especially in light of the fact that newborns are actually one of the most vulnerable populations for a virus like this because they're not able to be vaccinated up until the age of 1 year. What I would suggest right now, we don't have a broad outbreak across the population, so you don't need to avoid all public spaces. But, you know, even given that it's flu season right now, what you really want to do is you want to try to keep your infant away from people who are exhibiting signs of illness. So if there's anybody out there that you see has cough, fever, runny nose, sneezing, these are people, even in the best of times, you should be keeping your infant away from. So I would practice that going forward. Now, if it turns out that we are having a broader outbreak and we start to hear about a lot more cases, that advice might change, and we might start to say, if you have a child that's of an age that can't be vaccinated, let's keep them away from large gatherings, subway trains, stadiums, etc., until we sort out just how bad this is. But we're not there yet.
Oh, well, that's good to know so far. Okay, the next question is from Jordana in Toronto. And she says, my daughter is 6 weeks away from her first MMR shot, and knowing measles are an airborne virus, what places should we avoid geographically? I know you just got into, it's not necessarily avoid all public places, but I also got another message saying, should people outside of Toronto be worried as well?
Well, I think that we should be concerned. Again, I wouldn't suggest avoiding all public places because right now, as far as we can tell, it's not that bad. But that being said, you know, there are these 6 cases in Toronto. There was another case that's in the Niagara region, and there's a bunch of cases that are being explored in Quebec. We don't know if those are measles just yet, but we are looking into that as well. So I would advise taking precautions. I would advise avoiding, again, people that are sick, so anybody who has exhibited any signs of sickness. And if you are going to take your infant who has not been immunized out and around and be exposed to other people, just be careful when you see signs of illness in the community around you.
You can tell you hear from a lot of new parents.
Absolutely.
With the children. They are usually the most frightened, and as a parent myself, I get it.
And rightly so.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to another question here from a viewer on Twitter. How can an adult in their 40s ever find their vaccination record if no one in their family remembers and their pediatrician has died? How do you know if you're vaccinated or not?
So that's a very common question that we get all the time. What do you do if you don't know your vaccine status? So a lot of people over the age of 40 only received 1 shot of the MMR vaccine, and that's an important thing to know because when you only have 1 shot of the vaccine, the immunity you get from it is about 95%. But when you get that second dose that most of us got around the age of 5 years, it jumps the immunity up to about 99 to 100%. So far more effective, almost perfect protection. But luckily there is a blood test you can get. So if you're worried about whether or not you're immune, see your doctor. If they don't have records of whether or not you've had the 2 shots, you can get the blood test done. It'll let you know whether or not you are immune to measles. And if you're not, there's a booster shot you can get at any point in your life.
That is great information, so you can get a blood test and find out. Okay, let's get to our next question. It's from Terry. Do I have lifetime immunity if I had measles as a child?
So it is thought that you do have lifetime immunity from having had the illness. So again, if you are worried about your immune status, that blood test that lets us know whether you're immune from the vaccine similarly will let us know if you still have immunity from having had it as a child. So you should be fine for the rest of your life. But if there were to be a wider outbreak, even in the setting of having had measles earlier in your life, if you have any question mark about that history, I would advise getting another test just to make sure that you actually are immune.
Interesting. Great information. And this last one I just want to get to is from Anna. It comes to us on Twitter, and she says, if I had the shot decades ago, is it still as effective?
So there are question marks about does the immunity of the shot wane over the course of your life. So I would again wonder, has she had one shot or has she had both shots? Now, if she has had both shots, it's thought that the immunity does not wane very much, but all of us who work in the healthcare profession, we are actually required, due to the possibility of waning infection, to be tested every few years to make sure that we are remaining immune. And for somebody out there, again, in the setting of we don't know what our vaccine history is, and it's a long time ago, if you're worried, there is that test that you can get to see if you're still immune, and there is that booster you can get if you're not.
I just want to throw in one last question, Doctor. I've heard people talk about the airborne nature of this disease. How long is it airborne? Is there a time limit on that?
Actually, a matter of hours. So if somebody with measles is in a room and they cough or sneeze, that virus can actually float around in the air for several hours after they've been there. And it's one of the most infective viruses out there. So for somebody that's not immune, if they walk into that room an hour or two later and they breathe in that virus, there's a 90% chance they will get measles without the vaccine protection. So a very, very dangerous bug that spreads very easily.
But you said it's about 2 hours then? Or
a couple,
2 or more?
2 to 3 hours would be, I would say, the longest estimate for how long it'll stay in the air after somebody is there.
Well, what great information. Doctor, thank you very much for being here. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.